In Pennsylvania, almost 100,000 people are incarcerated. And while they serve their time, there are questions about what happens after: rehabilitation, employment, life in general.
Yeah, Natalie B joins us to talk about this and organizations who are trying to help. Natalie, we love your Be Inspired segments. This one is tough. There are some people who look at prison and jail time with very different approaches. So walk us through some of the stats.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, Mikey, because whenever we've had these kind of segments where we talk about some of the tough topics, I do get a little bit of anger on social media from it. And I think it's important that we remember that we can have tough conversations and we can find compassion even for people that we deem as unworthy. So I just want to frame it that way before we start.
Because I do think people look at this with like a toughened lens almost. You know, they look at this like, okay, you did something wrong, so why are we trying to make this more pleasant? But it's really, we have to look at it, what is the purpose?
What is the purpose
of this system?
Yeah, and when people are coming out of this system, Heather, do we want them to be productive? If we don't give them the tools while they're there and create some sense of rehabilitation, we're just going to be cycling people through. And like you had mentioned, for every 100,000 people in the United States, 600 or more are in the prison system. That's a heck of a lot. And 96,000 people in Pennsylvania alone
are incarcerated. In some capacity.
It's just wild.
So let's talk about some of the things that are coming up or that are happening in our prison systems. One of the things that you looked at specifically was that people are required to work almost.
Yes, and I thought this was really interesting. So in the prison system, you can make anywhere between 13 cents to 52 cents an hour, which is wild to me. And I started digging into this, and there are absolutely no labor laws in prison systems. So that means you can't unionize, you can't fight for minimum wage. There are no safety requirements, which I also found really exploitive. And if we look at who's being incarcerated, even though black people make up 13% of the United States' population, they're very much overrepresented in the system at 37%. So it really harkens back to something that I think is a very dangerous time that we are bringing back to the forefront through this sort of forced labor system, which was very disturbing. So I wanted to talk about organizations that were not only doing the right things, but also understanding that Pennsylvania, if you factor in probation and parole, we incarcerate more people. We're second in the country, just behind Georgia. So this is a real thing that we needed to address here, and even right in our own backyard with Allegheny County.
Yeah, and I'm thinking too, we're not always talking about very long, extensive prison sentences.
Right.
Like, even if you're sentenced for a day or for a week, I mean, that can drastically change your life.
Yes, it absolutely can, and they've done studies on this as well. That people have severe mental health outcomes. And back to your point, Heather, about the labor issue, people can be punished if they choose not to participate in working while they're incarcerated. In fact, they can be denied visitations, they can end up in solitary confinement, or lose the ability to appeal their sentence too. It's really intense.
So let's talk about some of these organizations that you mentioned that are trying to help some of these situations. One of them is Foundation of Hope. Tell us more about them.
Yeah, I love this one. This is an interfaith organization, and what they're really focused on is what we were talking about. How do you prepare people to re-enter society in a productive and healthy way so they don't cycle back through the system? And so they work to help empower people, give them the right tools, and help them build faith within themselves and the society around them. It's a really beautiful organization. This was what was cool doing the research for this, was finding out there are a lot of people trying to do wonderful work, and there's the little Be Inspired part of it.
There you go.
Yes, right. How about Abolitionist Law Center?
Yeah, this is a non-profit law firm, and it's a community organization, and it's led by people who have personal experience or you know, family or friends that have been in the system, and they're focused more on the system changes. So we talk a lot in this segment about how we have individual responsibility and collective responsibility. They're focused on creating a more transformational justice system that's equitable.
And really quickly, Let's Get Free.
I love Let's Get Free. This is the Women and Trans Prisoner Defense Committee, and they're focused on ending death by incarceration, which means helping people get out of the prison if they have been there because they don't have parole, so their life without parole. And they work through art programs, and they do pen pal letters with prisoners. You can work with Mr. Roboto Project for that once a month. So there's a lot going on in our communities to try to build our common humanity so we can get free together.
Thank you so much, Natalie.
Thank you.
Really good conversation. And if you're interested in learning more about the organizations Natalie mentioned, we're going to have links on our website, kdka.com.